Hyman, based in Chicago, and I am essentially a lifelong headhunter. I've been recruiting for about 30 years, which explains all the gray hair and the sleepless nights and the stress, because every search project that I work on, uh, there's always something, right? That's kind of the motto of the recruiting industry. And the good news is I'm happy to take you behind the curtain. There's really no mystery, share with you whatever you might like to know. And we can also talk from a job seeker or a candidate perspective along the way. So I think most of what we're going to cover is useful actually on both sides of the equation. You may find yourself building a team, or maybe you're at a point in your career where you're not yet building a team, but you will be. I think a lot of what we cover might be useful. If you're thinking about maybe finding your next role, that will probably be useful as well. Okay, one last sanity check. If you haven't already, type in the chat box where you are, and then we're going to get rolling here in 30 seconds. There's still more people kind of filing in, so I want to give them time to do that. Okay, let's roll. So again, Jeff Hyman, nice to see you all. We'll have an opportunity to interact in a little bit. I started by pulling together the questions from many of you. I apologize in advance. We're not going to get to all of them. There are many. There were way more than I expected, and I'll try offline to get back to you with a quick response if we don't cover it on the call. But they definitely fell into categories and some patterns, and so if I don't cover your exact question, odds are I'm going to hit something pretty close. Okay, well, why don't we start with the first question, and I'll tell you again, about half of these questions are from an employer perspective, half were asked from more of a candidate or job seeker perspective. I live at the intersection of those two, and I think you'll find it useful even if you're kind of on the mirror image side. So one of the first things that was asked many, many times is AI. And I will profess that I am not an AI expert, but was an early adopter of it and use it daily in our practice. And so the question was asked generally, how do you use it? And by the way, I think it can also be used on the job seeking side of the equation. So I'll give you some examples. And ChatGPT was mentioned most often, but this we experiment with all of the tools out there. So there are many stages throughout the recruiting process, or equally the job seeking process, where I think artificial intelligence tools will be immensely useful. And there's one where it's not, which I'll describe briefly. We use it in everything from drafting compelling job descriptions. I frequently talk, especially in chapter 4 of the book, that a job description needs to be very compelling. It's essentially an advertisement. And, I know many people, especially in HR, aren't advertising copywriters, but now you no longer need to hire one. You can simply draft a job description and say, punch this up. And man, it's amazing at that, and certainly takes less than 5 seconds. We also use it for compensation benchmarking if we want to get a sense of compensation for a particular role at a particular level in a particular industry and geography. We use AI to help guide us with a target list of employers. So frequently, a company that engages us, because we are paid by employers, will say, we're looking for someone from this sector, and they'll name 3 or 4 competitors, but ChatGPT will produce an exhaustive list for us of 37 companies in 5 seconds of candidates that might be equally relevant. So we use it often for that. We also use it for finding adjacent industries, which is one of my favorite tools. So, I'm a generalist. I work across industries, everything from tech to healthcare, business services, you name it. And of course, we'll often be asked by a client to look within their industry. Well, once we tap that out, and we just can't find the right person, or we do find the right person, but we just ding them for some reason, we can then look at adjacent industries. And the way to do that is you ask ChatGPT, hey, tell me all the industries that are like this industry in terms of this kind of sales cycle, selling to this kind of customer, this type of technology, et cetera, et cetera. And again, ChatGPT will just lay them all out, things that we will have thought of and things that we may not have thought of. Another example is job titles. Job titles vary a lot from company to company. And rather than brainstorming all the relevant job titles of candidates we might be looking for to fill a particular role, ChatGPT will make a whole list of them. And so it's really wonderful tool for kind of those brainstorming exercises. Okay, one area where I don't think ChatGPT or AI is immensely helpful is applying for jobs. There are tools out there that you pay 50 or 100 bucks a month, and it will they'll create a bot that automatically sends your resume to every job on the internet. I don't think that's a good use of money. I'm very skeptical that it's going to work. And as you'll know from my strategy, which we can talk about later on, it's kind of the antithesis of what I would recommend. So AI, immensely useful tool. I'm going to go to a couple more questions and then we'll open it up for some others. So another question that was asked is, are we in a white collar recession? And I understand that it does feel like that in many cases. So in case you don't follow it as closely as some folks, we're near a record low unemployment rate in the US. And we've only got one person undressing. So I'm going to just turn that video off there. Okay, good. We're at less than a 4% unemployment rate, and that in the US is remarkable. But if you drill into the detail, what you see is that the vast majority of new jobs being created are in three sectors: government, healthcare, and that's especially frontline workers, nurses, and the like, radiologists. And then the third is hospitality. So that's restaurants and, entertainment venues, et cetera. And so there is not a ton of net new job creation happening in white collar professions, especially at the senior level. I'll be the first to tell you that. However, if you're thinking about looking for your next role, don't let that data fool you, because that's net new jobs created. There are still millions of jobs created each year in the US, not to mention other markets, for two main reasons, at least. Number one, you've got 25% average attrition in most companies. So if a company has 100 people, a year later, they will lose 25 of those 100 people for a ton of different reasons. And they have to, just to stay flat, they need to hire another 25 people. So attrition is a huge job creator in the US. And by the way, attrition is increasing. So that engine is getting faster. And then the second is, many of our clients are using this, questionable economy to trade up or top grade or upgrade the people in their organization. If they've been holding on to a B player in a particular role because they were so desperately afraid that they might part ways and not be able to find someone, they are now finding it a bit easier to do that. The job market has loosened up a little bit compared to 2 years ago. And so there's a lot of upgrading and top grading going on. So, I will say that in this market, flexibility is key. Unlike 2 years ago or in 1999, for those of you that were around like me, where you could just name your ticket, right? You could name your role, your industry, your company, your location, your compensation, your title, anything you wanted. We're not in that market anymore, but we're not far from it. So when I say flexibility, it's not like just after the pandemic broke out, where I was advising people, if you have a job, keep it, no matter how unhappy you might be. We're not there either, but flexibility is important. And that leads to the next question, and then I'm going to open it up for another one of yours, which is, post-pandemic, has anything changed on how to find your next role? This was asked by quite a few individuals on the candidate side. And I guess my answer is, fundamentally, not much has changed. The things that are consistent: number one, most people look for a job entirely the wrong way. I created an hour-and-a-half video on this. You can find it on our YouTube channel, or just send me an email and I'll send you the link to it. Goes through step by step how to find your next role. The punchline is most people spray and pray. So they click apply online. That is one of the single worst ways to find your next role. Statistically, it almost never works. What does work, which is laid out in the video, is methodical targeting of a short list of companies and finding ways into those companies, which the video goes through. That still works. Nothing has changed about that. In fact, there was a huge article in the journal just a couple hours ago that strategy is working better now than ever. Because reference our first point, AI is causing such disruption with job boards, right? You've got endless streams of people applying for jobs. And of course, on the employer side, you've got endless AI bots doing the first screen of all these resumes before a human even sees them. The odds of finding your next job through a job board are infinitesimal, less than 5%. And so the video you'll find on our channel kind of walks through how to do it. So that hasn't changed. What has changed, though, which is probably the biggest change, is that we were in this morass of remote work and where are things going to wind up and work from home, and that has finally settled down, in my estimation. And where it has settled is, roughly speaking, and I'm generalizing, about a third of companies are remote, so completely remote. And that's about a third of our clients, completely remote. They'll hire people anywhere they can find great talent. That gives them huge advantages. It also gives them huge challenges, especially on the culture building side. Then on the other extreme, about a third of companies are 100% in office, means you are in office 5 days a week, 9 to 5, right? That is the expectation. And if you're not open to that, this is not the place for you. And then about a third are hybrid. But that definition of hybrid varies a lot. We've got clients who, come in the office once or twice a month, that's fine. And then we have other clients where it's a very regimented structure, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, at least 9 to 5. So if you're going to pursue hybrid, you need to define early in the process, well, what is hybrid? So that has changed a lot. And I think it's settling down. Most companies have picked what is their strategy going to be. They are dealing with the consequences because each of those three has pros and cons. And as individuals, of course, candidates are making their decisions. People that want to work at a remote company might be leaving a in-office company, and vice versa. A lot of it is, believe it or not, along extrovert and introvert lines, from what we're finding in our candidate interviews. So again, flexibility is key. It's very hard right now to find every single thing you want in a candidate or in a employer. And so having that prioritized list of what are your must-have, 1, 2, 3, 4 things, all those nice to haves may have to give. So let's do this. I'm going to pause. I got a bunch more questions, but I want to open it up to one or two. Why don't you type in the chat box just so we don't have dozens of people chatting all at the same time. And type in the chat box a quick question. If you submitted one already, odds are I'm going to get to it shortly. But if anyone has any they want to ask or a follow-up to what I've just covered, that would be great. And if not, we'll just keep rolling. Any tips for pivoting industries or job titles? That's a great question. Thanks, Jenna. Yes, I do have a tip. So it is very possible to switch industries. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't, but something has to be held constant. If someone wants to switch industries, I would strongly encourage them to hold their functional area constant, perhaps their geography constant. In other words, don't rock the boat too much. Job title, don't expect necessarily a promotion or an advancement. A lot of employers will take a chance on someone from outside the industry, but they're not also going to give them a promotion to boot. In 2021, that was the case, not so much now. So hold something constant. Similarly, by the way, if you want to change job functions, I would advise you to do it in the same industry. So I describe it as kind of a two-step pivot, right? Pivot. If you want to, let's say someone wanted to change function and industry, just do one at a time. Don't try to do both at the same time. Very unlikely to be successful. And by the way, I would encourage people that want to make a change to also be as flexible as possible on compensation. just to get your quote unquote ticket punched in an industry or a function, there might be a bit of a penalty on compensation. But if you're confident in your abilities and you get in the door, kick ass, in 6 months, the company realizes, wow, we've got a tiger by the tail, and you can have that discussion to be made whole. So another question, and then I'll go back to some of the ones kind of pre-prepared. Is an MBA useful for pivoting industries while retaining the job function? Uh, for those of you who don't know, many people that go back to get their MBA or maybe even part-time MBA do it as a path to making a change. I went to an MBA program. Many of our clients look for candidates that have. I would say it is becoming less vital, and this debate is also happening at the undergrad level. I'm sure you've been following this. Just the value of a formal education with the half-life of information becoming so short, and the online opportunities for advancement, and the number one university in the world, which is YouTube. And I mean that seriously, for skills gaining. I don't think an MBA is necessary to make a change between industries. Can it be useful? Yeah, but I wouldn't say our clients would say, wow, she has an MBA, therefore we'll take the risk on her. I think they will take the risk on her because she's made a compelling case that the dynamics of the industry she's moving from are comparable to the one she's moving to. And again, a lot of that is covered in the video that I mentioned on our YouTube channel. I'm going to go back to the ones pre-prepared, and then we'll hop back to the chat, and we'll keep going as many as we can cover. What's the latest on the recent FTC ruling to ban non-compete agreements? This was asked many, many times. It is a very long answer, so I'm going to summarize it, which is that there's probably more questions than answers at this point in time. For those of you that don't know or might have missed it, there was a monumentous ruling by the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, recently, about a month ago, that basically said non-competition agreements or non-competes are going to be banned. Largely, that was, I'm summarizing, but that was kind of the headlines anyway. It was never the intention, by the way, that would apply necessarily to retroactively to existing agreements. You can't just go to a company and tear up all their agreements. That's not typically doable, but it was kind of looking forward. When I say there's more questions than answers, it's partially because employer groups are protesting or appealing this decision. Employers, as you would expect, want to protect their intellectual property. They don't love employees, especially executive employees, going from a company to a competitor and bringing their secrets with them. Obviously, some states like California, it's not really enforceable anyway, but generally speaking, that's been in the states for dozens of years. So employer groups are protesting all this, and of course, they're throwing a shit ton of money at it. So it remains to be seen where this is going to wind up. And then, of course, you've got the presidential election coming up, and political parties have different feelings on this topic, of course. So I don't know that it's going to be resolved anytime soon. I wouldn't make a lot of key business decisions based on it existing or not. I will tell you, and I wrote a long piece about this last month, which is that companies, I think, generally go overboard by overestimating their intellectual property and worrying too much about employees going to a competitor. They worry about a sales rep taking their clients to a competitor. I rarely see that strategy work. Turns out the customers are loyal to the company, not the sales rep in many cases. I see companies worry about their IP of their products being stolen, and I just think there's no secrets in business anymore. Things have changed a lot. So I understand employers' desire to have non-competes. I've used them in the past myself, but I think generally speaking, you are going to see a scaling back. It might just be executive level, or it might just be very tightly defined. If you say you can't go to a competitor, largely those are unenforceable because competitor is too too loose a definition versus some agreements which might name three particular companies. Those are a lot more enforceable. What's shocking to me, and then I'm going to move on, is that most employees have no idea what they signed when they joined, which is shocking. They didn't keep a copy of their offer letter. They're uncomfortable going to HR to ask for a copy. And so we asked them, can we even have this discussion? And they're like, I don't know what I signed. I've been here 8 years. And I would say it is important for you to know what you signed, and use this ruling as a reason to go to HR and just, play Columbo and say, I'm just kind of curious. Well, can I get a copy of the offer letter as signed? I don't even know what's in it. Just kind of play dumb, and get a copy of it. It is important that you know what you signed as an individual. Last advice on that topic: if you're a employer or if you're a job seeker candidate, you must have a talented employment attorney guiding you. Best $500 an hour you will ever spend to, if nothing else, just keep up to date on this topic because it's going to change a lot. Okay, let's go back to the chat. A ton of questions. Thank you. We're not going to get to all of them, but I will circle back and follow up on the ones that we don't get to. I was recently laid off, wondering if I should update my LinkedIn to show an end date or let it be. Good question. Kind of depends on the situation. There is a half-life. Obviously, if you haven't been with a company for 2 years, I think it's inappropriate to say you're still working there. On the other hand, if it's been 2 days, probably not the first thing you should be worried about. What is the exact number? I don't know, maybe a month or two. There are some employers that are biased towards currently working candidates, currently employed individuals. And for that reason, I think the more important question than what should my LinkedIn profile say is get working. And that doesn't mean just take a job, but do some consulting work, do some freelance work, get on Upwork and be doing some consulting gigs, work for a nonprofit, be advising people, whatever it is, show that you're still engaged, you're still in the market. It will overcome that issue to a large degree, especially if you were laid off no fault of your own. And more importantly, having that income, even if it's partial income, relieves that pressure so much to jump into the first opportunity that comes along. I see many candidates, many job seekers make really, really bad decisions because of financial desperation. And so if you're doing consulting work or working 1 day a week or advising companies, and very easy to find these gigs now with platforms like Upwork and Fiverr, et cetera, you can really relax or ease that pressure. So let's do one more and then we'll go back to the pre-prepared questions. Can't find the video that you referred to. So just send me an email, jeff@recruitrockstars.com, and I will send you a link to the video. But they're all on our Recruit Rockstars channel on YouTube. We've got hundreds of videos. What do you recommend is the best targeting message to an executive leader at an organization when a role you're looking for isn't open? Great question. That's from Walt. Thanks, Walt. Don't assume that the role is not open. It may not be, but you'd be shocked at how often an employer, the role is open and they just haven't posted it yet. The hiring manager is thinking about making a change, but they haven't even told the incumbent yet that they're going to make a change. Maybe that person has resigned recently or given notice. Maybe the company is just keeping an eye open for talent on the market, but they haven't committed to a search. And so I would go into it, Walt, with the thought that maybe it is, maybe it's not open. Who knows? Don't make that assumption. The video that I mentioned, which I'll reference again, is about 90 minutes, and it goes through how to track down the right person, which is typically not HR. It's typically the hiring manager, how to get in touch with them, how to get their email address, and what to say. But the messaging is short and it's impactful, and it's got a very specific call to action, which is asking for just a 15-minute conversation. And I see that strategy work far better than just blindly clicking apply on job boards. Almost a useless strategy. Okay, let's go back to some of the questions that I received, and then we'll come back to the chat. I'm going to grab a quick sip, and then we'll go. This is just water, I promise. Okay, is it okay to ask candidates to complete an extensive project for free? That's a great question. In chapter 6 of the book that we wrote, and I'll give you a free copy at the end of this session, it's all about the test drive. And the test drive is, this is important to know, is the single best predictor of how a candidate will perform on the job. By the way, interviews are the single worst predictor of how a candidate will perform on the job. This is all backed by research. Now, I don't expect interviews to go away anytime soon until Elon Musk invents a way around that. But 90% of companies don't do a test drive. I require all of our clients to do a test drive with every finalist before they hire them. And I will tell you that 50% of the time, the test drive shows that the person is awful, even though they nailed the interviews. And we dodged the bullet on a mishire. Not a bad person, but just a bad hire. So test drives are vitally important. I feel very passionately about them. Now the question is, should candidates do them for free? That's a different question. If I was a candidate, I would expect to be paid for my time. So I think it's a very fair request for a candidate to ask to be compensated for their time. They're probably going to do the work on weekends and evenings if they're currently working. And by the way, I advise our clients to accommodate the candidate's schedule. If that candidate is currently working, it may be evenings and weekends. And so that money that a company will spend, a couple $100, $1,000, whatever, is the single best ROI that I've ever seen in recruiting. Because if you can spend $500 or $1,000 and avoid a bad hire that will have cost you $50,000 or $100,000, no kidding, great investment. You can do it as a contractor, consult your employment attorney that we discussed earlier, and they'll help you find a way around it. And for a candidate or job seeker, I think it's very fair to respectfully say, look, I understand the importance of this. I'd love to participate. It's going to take me some time, and I think it's only fair to be compensated for that time. If the employer says no, then I guess the candidate has a decision to make, right? There's no reason they have to do it. So that's kind of where I am on that topic. Let's do one more from the pre-asked questions. How do I find roles like board roles, advisory roles, fractional gigs? This was asked a lot. Basically not traditional full-time roles. These are very possible to find these. By the way, very hard to find your first board role. That is something I will say, that most employers that engage us to find a board member want someone who's already been a board member. So it's important to get your ticket punched. Quite often that happens with nonprofits, and that's terrific. If you can't, then appoint yourself a board member of a board, create a nonprofit, create an organization. That's another creative way to do it. Don't look to be necessarily paid. You could join a board of a 5-person startup that can't afford to pay you, but you're getting your board member chops and experience, and that's super important. And then from there, there are website, communities and matchmaking services that focus exclusively on board members. You post your profile, and companies tap into that sometimes. Search firms, there are search firms, recruiting firms that focus on board members. Again, they're typically engaged by people looking for someone very specific, board membership experience in a healthcare, medical device company or a fintech company, whatever it may be. So don't expect necessarily to find it that way. You're going to find it just like your full-time role, which is personal networking. And again, reference the video that I mentioned on YouTube. Advisory roles, fractional gigs, Upwork and other platforms like that are terrific for finding those. You set your hourly rate. You can decide if you're, and you can change it all the time. It's a very fluid market. You may say, you know what, I got time on my hands. I'll charge $30 an hour. Other times you may say, you know what, I'm not working unless it's $150 an hour. And you can set those rates and adjust accordingly. Build reviews, build momentum, and the algorithm rises you to the top, and the rich get richer. And so I see a lot of people building very successful practices, if you will, on platforms like Upwork. Okay, let's go back to the chat and take another question. How can I get the attention of someone like you, a recruiter? That's asked by Chandra. Thank you so much. One way, of course, is attending my office hours. But in all seriousness, it's super hard. And that's not to say you shouldn't try, or an individual job seeker candidate shouldn't try, but let me explain the dynamic. Recruiters or recruiting firms, search firms, executive search firms, headhunters are paid by an employer to conduct a search to find a very specific person. They're given a set of criteria, typically non-negotiable, and they're also given a lot of pressure to do it quickly and a budget, how much the company is willing to pay. And so there's two ways an individual job seeker might approach recruiters. One is about a particular search that that company is working on at the moment. Very hard to get that information to know what search I'm working on at the moment. It's not publicly advertised. We're not really looking for a ton of applicants because we're more outbound, looking for very specific people in the market. If you happen to hit me at the right time and it's perfect hit, perfect match, oh my God, that's terrific. But I will tell you the statistical probability of that is almost zero. So take that for what time investment you want to put into it. The second, which is worth some time, is getting to know and build relationships with recruiters ahead of time. So, in other words, in anticipation of a search they might get down the road. And so, for those, there's no harm in reaching out to recruiters such as myself to build a relationship. Understand that recruiters are focused, as you would expect, on their day job, which is filling the search assignments they've got at the moment. They don't have time to do a lot of informational conversations, but they would love to talk with you when that search comes up for which that individual might be a great fit. So it's important to stay top of mind, but not do it in an annoying way. I think the right frequency is every 2 to 3 months. So I would build a target list of recruiters who specialize in the industry, function, and geography combination. That's very easy to find online. You can ask ChatGPT, and build that network and stay in touch with those people 2 to 3 months. Don't reach out to them and say, you got a job for me, you got a job for me, you got a job for me. Instead, reach out to them and say, hey, just wanted to update you. I just won this award. Our company was just named best at this. Here's a press release on the new product we just launched, etc. You're soft marketing yourself as dynamic, as an achievement-oriented individual. Recruiters are love that. But that said, if they don't have the right role, they don't have the right role. And so again, the statistical probability of finding your next role through a search firm or recruiter is about 5%. So it's about 5%. And job boards are about 5%. 80% of jobs are still found through personal networking, reference today's Wall Street Journal article. So I'm not saying don't spend time on job boards applying. I'm not saying don't spend time on search firms, but spend the right proportion of your time against trying to contact people like me, because the statistical probability of me working on the right role at the right time, at the right level, the right comp, the right geography is almost zero. And so building a relationship ahead of time, great. But if you're thinking, hey, I want to find a role in the next 6 months, you could spend a whole lot of time contacting dozens or hundreds of recruiters. There are 90,000 in the US, and waste the time versus personal networking. Question from Roger: should one try to get an intro referral before applying to the role? Yes, 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 and yes, a million times yes. Any referral, any introduction will bring your paper to the top of the pile. When I say any, I mean most. Versus cold applying, clicking apply, or having some AI bot do it for you. You are one of the morass of the 500 to 900 applicants that a job posting might get, most of which will never be seen by a human set of eyes. Getting any introduction helps. And yes, do it simultaneously. There's no harm in applying, but do the extra credit, which is to say, hey, Phil, we went to Indiana University together, and I saw that you work at Intel, and I just applied to this, and I'd love your advice on, people love to be asked their advice. I'd love your advice on how to get in front of the hiring manager who I've researched online, and I think it's Sally. Would you be open to getting me in front of her? And he may or may not, but there's a better chance than just clicking apply. So let's go back to some of the questions asked in advance. Is it okay to call a candidate's current employer for a reference check? Generally speaking, I would say no, but let's drill into that a little bit. Chapter 7 talks about reference checks in the book, which are a vital part of the process that, by the way, most companies skip or completely do it in a way that's not useful. And if you're a strong candidate, you want your references checked. So it's super important for both sides. Um, I'm a big advocate of what is called backdoor references. That is reaching out to people who were not provided to me by the candidate. When a candidate gives me their list of references, I already know those references are going to be great. Yes, of course, I still speak with them, but I'm not expecting them to be anything other than glowing references. By the way, if your references are not glowing, don't give them. But because we know they're going to be glowing references, it's equally important to do what's called backdoor references. And by the way, whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, it's been done for ages. So this is not a new strategy or my strategy, but it's finding people who were not given to me, but who know the individual well. Could have been a customer, could have been a vendor, could have been a coworker, et cetera, who can speak to their performance and their values and their output, et cetera, et cetera. With LinkedIn, it's super easy to find them, but I do not reach out to, and nor would I ever reach out to, someone at their current employer. I also disclose to a finalist candidate that I'm doing this in advance and make sure I have their okay. And some candidates are not okay with that and they withdraw from the process, and more power to them. I won't continue in the process. I won't introduce them to a client unless I know that we can do this, because this is the most important decision in business, is who you're going to put on your team. And I respect someone's decision to say, no, I don't want you calling anyone. But then we're kind of stuck because we can't get the information that we need to make a well-informed decision. So read chapter 7 if you want to understand how that's done. In 30 years, I've never once had it backfire on me, meaning I've never gotten anyone fired or something. But it is important to be transparent, to be, of course, be careful and delicate. And from a candidate or job seeker perspective, I will tell you that over the years, you should be continually nurturing your list of references. It's hugely important. As a recruiter, as a headhunter, I'm very impressed when someone gives me a list of references that's 11 versus the 4 I might have asked for, or they give it to me early in the process because they say, look, talk to any of these people. It's not enough to get the job, but it makes a very important statement on their confidence level. Okay, let's go back to the chat and then we'll switch back over to some of the pre-prepared questions. So what's the best way to, this is from Ilias, what's the best way to negotiate comp for a full-time role if you're coming from a non-traditional background, a series of fractional roles? Well, of course, the number one rule of negotiating is don't throw out your number first, right? He who talks first loses in any negotiation. So just like I never speak first in a negotiation, nor should you or anyone on this call understand what the other party is thinking and prepared to offer. And that becomes, of course, the starting point. I will say that in general, fractional roles, gigs, if you will, and I'm not talking about maybe driving an Uber, but kind of a white collar professional role. Quite often they pay a premium. And so if I've stitched together 3 or 4 interim gigs or fractional gigs or whatever, the sum total of that money might actually be more than one full-time role. The one full-time role has certainty, nothing certain in life, but it's a job, right? It doesn't have an end date like a gig does, or can be ended at any time. It might come with healthcare benefits that's worth 13 to 20%. So understand that if you're going from 3 or 4 gigs that you've stitched together, or fractional roles, to a one full-time role, you might actually wind up taking a comp reduction. Not that that's a bad thing. It might make a lot of sense to do that, but that's quite often the case. Let's do another question. What about references on LinkedIn? Great question. Worth having updated ones out there? Yes. Have references on your LinkedIn? No, they don't count for squat. Hate to be the bearer of bad tidings, but yeah, just I don't think most people will look at your references on your LinkedIn and say, oh my God, he's the one. He has a reference from his boss 4 years ago and we need to move quickly. It just doesn't happen, especially because things change so quickly now. It's just so dynamic. All that said, yeah, you should have some. It's noticeably absent if you don't, but it's not going to get the job. Okay, let's go to another one asked in advance. Is it even worth applying to jobs online? Like I said earlier, sure, it's worth it. I wouldn't invest the disproportionate amount of my search time on that because, again, statistically, it's 5% likely that you're going to find your next role from a job board. But use job postings and set up all the job alerts so they're automatically brought to your email box. You don't have to spend time looking for them. Everyone has job alerts. Indeed, ZipRecruiter, Monster, Career Builder, built in, even our job board, Venturesome, and use that information as data to then go after a role. So the perfect role lands in your email box from some job board, and you're like, oh my God, that's my dream job. Don't just click apply. Use that information to figure out who is the hiring manager, what are they looking for, what do they need, dissect the industry, understand their competitors, and go after it. Highly likely to be successful because 99% of people will never do that. They're busy, they're lazy, they're whatever, they're just clicking apply, apply, apply. If you do the opposite, again, laid out in that YouTube video, I see that strategy very successful. And job boards are becoming even worse because of AI and these bots that I described earlier. The number of applicants is going up dramatically. There was one referenced in that journal piece this morning where they got 950 applicants. And if you think a human is going through 950 applications, they're just not. No human will ever see them. Sometimes companies post because they're required to by law, or they think it's the right thing to do. But if you go after it, and especially with introduction, you're at the top of the pile, your odds go from 5% to a multiple of that. Let's go to one more question asked in the back. Actually, we covered that one. So let's go to one in the chat. Since networking is the most effective tool for finding a job, what specific networking tasks would you recommend to build and nurture your network? It's a great question. Thanks, Kevin. I think most people go about networking the wrong way. They go about what I would call random networking. That would be going to a cocktail party and just kind of flitting about and talking to people. I love networking cocktail parties as much as the next guy, but it's not a great use of time if you think about it. The statistical probability of running into the right person is actually quite low. The opposite of that is purposeful networking. And this takes research, but with time and LinkedIn and ChatGPT, it'll put you head and shoulders above everyone else, which is building a list, a targeted list of the people that you want to meet, the people you need to meet. They're the movers and shakers of your industry. They're the number two at your target companies who you know is going to be the CEO one day. It's the CEO in waiting. It's the board members of that company. It's the recruiters who serve those companies. And so you have a target list of 30, 50, 500 people. Make it manageable. It's probably, 100. And go about networking to those people. The video talks about some strategies for doing that. There are wonderful books on the topic. People love to be asked their advice. People love compliments. They see through transparent stuff. So it has to be authentic and genuine. Set up your Google alerts to alert you every time one of those 100 people is mentioned in the media, and you send them a note to congratulate them, and you send them, hey, I saw this article. I thought it might be relevant to you. You'll be shocked. You may not meet those 100 people, but you may meet 20 of them. And then you build a relationship in a purposeful way. These are typically going to be the future leaders, right? So they're not necessarily the CEOs of all the companies. They might be, those are, of course, the hardest to reach. They might be the number two, might be the head of HR. If you're in marketing, it might be the chief marketing officer. Every year there are awards given for the top 20 CMOs of the year, the top 50 CFOs of the year. I'm not saying those are the ones, but use those lists to your advantage and go through them to understand who are the people that I want to meet. Next question. From Walt. I've had a number of search firms take me through the process and rounds of interviews to come back and tell me they wanted someone more aligned with their vertical. Is that a way of saying it's not you, it's me? I love it. I can't tell you specifically, but I can tell you what's in the mindset. And by the way, the book that we wrote, which I'm going to give you a copy of at the end, was written for employers, but as a candidate, I think you can learn a ton from it because you'll understand what is going behind the scenes and how the sausage is made. And I'll give you the link in a bit. Um, you'll never know is the first thing. So spending your time worrying about it and being pissed off about it is it's not a productive strategy because you're never going to know the truth. And it ranges hugely from our client changed their mind. Happens all the time. Uh, Maybe a third of the time. And part of that is because as they think they were looking for this, and as they see candidates, they realize, you know what, we're really looking for that. And so the process becomes fine tuned over the course of a search, which can take anywhere from 1 to 6 months, and they might see dozens of candidates along that process. So it genuinely the criteria can change. They may realize they can't afford you, uh, or don't want to stretch quite as much. So they have a budget, and you were above the budget, but they thought they'd invest the time. But then at the end, they get cold feet. So it can be a financial issue. It can be backdoor reference checks that they've started, didn't tell you about, that came back with a thumbs down for whatever reason. You'll never know who, or you'll never know what, but that happens. We get a bad check on somebody, stay away from her. She is evil, just completely unethical, or whatever. That will turn us off to a candidate. We're probably not going to tell the candidate we've been told you're unethical. So we'll find another way to end the process. Um, there's no way around that. What I would do instead is understand to the best of your ability early in the process before you invest your time as a candidate, especially if you're currently working and you're busy, to the best of your ability, understand what are the criteria, what is the company looking for, what's most important to them, what's the budget, what's the comp on the role, what specific achievements are they looking for, and even if you think you have the ability to sell them because you're the world's best salesperson, take a look in the mirror and say, I'm not really a match for what they're looking for or what they told me they're looking for. And then you have to decide to what extent you're willing to invest the time. And I would say invest the time if you have the time. But you may only have time for 2, 3 processes, at a time, and you may want to proactively pull out of some where you say, this is such a long shot for me, or they told me the comp is twice what I'm making, which sounds great, of course. But then you have to also ask the follow-up question, why? Is it because they don't know what the market is? Yeah, it could be that. Or is it because they're looking for a much heavier person than you? And at the end, they might ultimately feel like you're just not quite there yet compared to what they were looking for. So ask those questions early before you invest time with 7 meetings. And one final thing is it is completely acceptable to ask along the way, where are we? Right? How are we doing here? I've met with 4 people on the team. I'm very interested in pursuing this, but I also want to understand, where we are. And that's a very fair question to ask to your point person, whether it's an internal recruiter, external recruiter, head of HR, etc. Okay, let's go to another question. Can you talk about ageism for people with 20 plus years of experience? I've been told I'm too seasoned. I'm not yet 50. Thank you. I won't mention your name. I'm one of the oldest on this call, so I can speak to this. Is there ageism? Yes, there is. I hope no one is shocked. I hope no one dropped the phone. There's racism. There's ageism. There's I don't like her accentism. He's too much of a Southerner. She's too tightly wound. I don't like the way he dresses. I've heard it all in 30 years of doing this. Are you going to change that? Probably not, unless you want to devote your life to that cause, which more power to you. Are things improving? Yes. Uh, Compared to 30 years ago, we're placing more women CFOs than we ever have. We're placing more male executive assistants than we ever have. There's more women CEOs. Sure. Are things improving? Yes. A good chunk of our placements, a very healthy chunk, are underrepresented groups that 30 years ago never would have been the case. So are we getting there? Yeah. Do we have a long way to go? Yeah. That said, we are under a 4% unemployment rate in this country. And so it is just like dating. There's a lid for every pot. And it is important to understand that and bear that front of mind. Certainly, if I look at a management team of a company and it's all old white men, I will factor that into my thinking of their openness and understanding of diversity and underrepresented groups, et cetera. And you might want to think about how much time you want to invest with that company. If you're an old white man, maybe that's the place for you. Maybe you're very likely to find ageism is not a case at that company. Um, so do your research and do your homework to the makeup of their workforce, and are they walking the walk, or are they just full of it? Look at who they're hiring. LinkedIn is amazing. Pay a little bit for LinkedIn Premium. You can see who they're hiring, who's joined recently, who left recently. You can see all kinds of information. And it's just data points, but it might help you understand their openness, their willingness to consider your gender, orientation, age group, location, whatever it might be. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it. And I can say that as, the oldest person on the call, or one of them, that we've got clients that are looking for experience in many, many cases. We've got clients that are looking for up and coming or high potentials because they can't afford the very experienced person. There's a lid for every pot, and it's just like dating. You gotta put yourself out there and go after the opportunities. But I would go after the opportunities where you think you got a fighting chance, and that research online can help a lot. Feel free to type your questions in the chat. We got 8 more minutes. I'll get through as many of them as I can. Any question, and then I got some free tools and resources for you at the end before you hang up. Make sure you get those. Respectfully, HRs do not understand this while they switch industries. So uh, one of the listeners raises a valuable point, or an important point, which is HR understanding this about candidates switching industries or functions. Just like external recruiters or headhunters like myself, internal recruiters, and to a great extent, internal human resources leaders, HR people, who are incredibly valuable, um, are often given marching orders. They're given criteria. They're given an understanding of what the hiring manager is looking for. At the end of the day, the hiring manager makes that decision in most cases. And if they say to the HR person, I'm looking for someone with 10 years of fintech experience, and then the HR person, it's like playing operator, tells the outside headhunter, he's looking for someone with 10 years of fintech experience. Quite often that is taken literally. And so only candidates with 10 years of fintech experience are considered. And by the way, someone with 25 years of fintech experience, if that even exists, is not considered because they have too much. They're too heavy or too expensive. Um, that doesn't mean that great recruiters don't push back. I push back all the time. I want to broaden the aperture because many of the things my clients look for are not predictive of anything, which the book talks about. And I use data to back it up. Great HR leaders often push back on the hiring manager and say, I understand what you want, but you told me what you're willing to pay, and you're not going to find it. So we need to make some adjustments here, right? Fewer years of experience, or increase the comp, or maybe we need to look at a different industry, adjacent industry. Things are negotiable. And as I said earlier, a lot of times things change through the process as the hiring manager meets more candidates or kisses more frogs. Their view might change as to what they need. So does HR understand more than you think? But they often aren't really given much of a choice. If the hiring manager wants X and they bring Y, Z, and A, quite often the hiring manager will say, "What are you doing? That's not what I feel I need in the role." Great HR leaders use data and push back appropriately, and weaker HR people often don't. And then you're wasting your time because you're dealing with an intermediary who doesn't have the power. They have the power to say no, but not the power to say yes, which is often the case with recruiters such as myself. I can't make a hiring decision. I can say no, but I can't say yes. That's up to our client, the hiring manager. Okay, time for a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay, I think we've covered all of them. Any last ones? Any going once, going twice? Wow, we did it in an hour. Okay, some free resources. I think I've got, yeah, some free resources. Oh, there's a question. Here's a question from Anita. If you were looking for a recruiter role, what industry would you go to? Great question. For those of you who don't know, recruiters look for jobs just like everybody else. Many of them have been laid off over the past couple of years as the job market has slowed a little bit. And many of them are now being hired back, which is a great sign. They're often the first ones laid off and the first ones hired back. Um, what industries, think about what industries are growing, right? Healthcare, booming. Um, Vegas is booming. AI is booming. EVs, not booming, but going to boom, right? So track the industries that you have a passion for, an inclination for, and pursue those industries. And I would give this advice to anyone, not just recruiters, but marketers, salespeople, finance people, especially those with skills that are pretty malleable and cross industries quite well. Um, it's important for you to know the macro trends. If you're not reading the journal and the New York Times business section and things of that nature, and your trade publications, you're missing out on the macro trends that you should be thinking about for the next 5, 10, 20 years. So those are some areas that are doing well. Chips, right? Chips are all coming back to be manufactured in the US because of the CHIPS Act and a bunch of other trends. Intel and all these places, they're building factories in Ohio and right, ton of opportunities, tons of needs. Um, Elon Musk raised billions yesterday for his new AI company, and they posted like 100 jobs. So um, be careful that you're not sniffing out kind of a one-time blip, right, where someone raised a bunch of money and it's going to go away. But macro trends are incredibly useful. Okay, one last question, and then I'm going to go through the free resources. How do I know if my LinkedIn or CV sucks? I'm glad you asked, and I did not put Walt up to that question. I have an answer for that. So some resources. Okay, the book, it's free. It's $30 on Amazon. Please don't buy it. Download it, recruitrockstars.com/book. If you're a job seeker, if you're a candidate, you'll see how the sausage is made. If you're a leader or a future leader, and I will tell you as a headhunter, as a recruiter, the number one thing that I look for is people that know how to hire other great people. And this is often lost on people. If you want to be a CFO, if you want to be a CEO, if you want to raise VC money and start a company, if you want to run a department, a manufacturer, a plant, whatever it is you want to do, you have to learn how to recruit and retain great people. And if you can do that, you will go to the top of the stack because 95% of people suck at it. They have no idea how to recruit and hire people, which is why we wrote the book. Please don't pay for it. Get it free. Here's the address. Okay. The book teaches you how to do it yourself. We teach people how to fish. If you just need us to fish for you, we have a low-cost alternative to using a full search service. You'll meet 10 people in 10 days. Each of those 10 people is qualified and interested, and it costs $1,500. We've got 500 clients who love it. I'd love to talk to you about that. That's at recruitrockstars.com. The service is called Shortlist, and it's guaranteed, and people love it. If you are a candidate or want to know if your LinkedIn or CV sucks, according to Walt's question, we offer a limited number of LinkedIn makeovers. I do it myself. You'll get me for 30 minutes. It's $500 flat fee. We will tear apart your LinkedIn, or if you want to do your CV, we can do that too. Although I would recommend you focus on your LinkedIn for obvious reasons. And I would say 90% suck. When I say suck, what I mean is they are sub-optimized. It is now, right or wrong, by the way, the single first place that people look, right? They got 700 million profiles for a reason, and therefore headhunters, recruiters, heads of HR, and hiring managers go to LinkedIn first. And there is an enormous difference between this profile and this profile, getting the call or not getting the call. Happy to spend time with you. If that's useful, just send me an email. We'll set up a 30-minute session. Free website, free job board. We have the biggest job board in the world for venture capital and private equity-backed companies. It's called Venturesome. It's venturesome.com. Over 100,000 jobs. These are not, multi-level marketing bullshit jobs. They're real jobs, professional white-collar jobs from about 3,000 portfolio companies, and it's totally free. Venturesome.com. And if you're an employer, we'll post your jobs there for free as well. So you can check that out at venturesome.com. And that's it. It is 2 Eastern, 1 Central. We did it. Any questions, send me a note. I'm sorry if we didn't get to your questions. There were more than we had time for. I'll try to hit you back, jeff@recruitrockstars.com. Please let me know if this was useful. We can do it again in the future. And it was super to see you all, and I appreciate you making the time. Thank you all. Have a great day.